hello, hello. How are you all? Oh my goodness. The last talk on the last day. You made it. Congrats, guys. This has been awesome, hasn't it? I know, we're here. Oh, this has been fun, and I've really been enjoying the 80s, let me tell you. It's been a blast. So my name is Alyssa Nicoll, and I'm an Angular developer advocate for Kendo UI at Progress, and I'm also a Google developer expert. For however much that's worth, there's only a limit to my Angular knowledge. But today I'm actually going to share a small piece of something that I recently learned and am really passionate about, and that's service workers. I think Shai just tried to cheer, but it came out more of a wheeze, but thank you, yes. So, service workers and cows, a love story. Then I'm going to start this story with the beginning, at the end, with the takeaway. So, service workers, I really, really hope that you take away two things. One, that they're not that difficult to implement, and that two, they can actually make a really huge difference to people using your apps. So recently, in January, I moved to Oklahoma. And Oklahoma, you might be like, sooner, right? What's in Oklahoma, you might be asking? Well, there's these lovely creatures. My family has a ranch out there. And then these lovely creatures, right? So we went to Oklahoma to be close to family. And as many awesome things as Oklahoma has to provide, the cows and the family, internet didn't seem to be one of them. So the best internet plan that we were offered in January was 6 megabits, and that's not a typo, it's a lowercase b. And as you know, if you've ever purchased an internet package, what is, the speed on the package is not necessarily what you're getting on day-to-day life. So I took a speed test for everyone. I know, right? I know. At times we were literally worse than dial-up. And I was like, I'm a web developer in the middle of America, and that's my speed. Like, it was such an awakening, a huge shock. And I really hope that if nothing else, you walk away with this awareness that not all of your users have, maybe the network speeds that you're blessed with. So even, the middle of America. So this land of mooers, it really has taught me over the last few months how incredibly valuable service workers are. And you might be asking yourself, if you've never used a service worker or heard of the term service worker, how the heck is that helping us in this situation? And so in order to answer the how, we really should probably answer the what. So what is a service worker? And after reading lots of different definitions on the web, I settled on Alyssa's definition. It's a JavaScript file. And it's a JavaScript file that allows us to do a couple of really cool things. It's going to allow us to do things like push notifications. It'll also allow us to do things like background sync. But the main thing that we're going to focus on today, and it's the thing that honestly made such an impression on me in my horrible network speeds in the land of cows, is to intercept and cache network responses. So when I was working with these terrible network speeds, it was literally the difference between being able to use a site and not. Like, it wasn't, oh yeah, I noticed how fast their site was. It literally wouldn't load, or it would if they had used a service worker to previously cache different assets on their site. So I have been speaking since as long as I've been developing, for about 5 years now, a glorious amount. And I started using a speaking coach about 3 years ago, and we've been doing some exercises. And I don't know if any of you are interested in public speaking, but if you're interested even in consolidating ideas, this can be a really good exercise to go through. And so you take a talk, or maybe you're going to do a presentation for a meeting, and this one's a 20-minute talk. So I took that 20-minute talk, and I broke it down, and I did it in 5 minutes. And then I did it in 3 minutes, and then I did it in 1 minute, and then in 1 sentence and 1 word. And this can be a really, really valuable exercise, even if you're not planning on doing any public speaking, to just consolidate down ideas, to get to the meat or the heart of what it is. And so when I did that for this talk, I got this sentence. Service workers are the aspirin to the headache that is painful network speeds. And my 1 word was aspirin. So I really think that sums up nicely service workers And today I want to walk through my journey of actually using my first service worker. So I work on ng-doc. I don't know if any of you know Joe Eames. Maybe not in this crowd. Anybody? Yeah? We got a couple people. So Joe last year was like, hey, can you help me with the UI part of my app? We kind of want to give Bootstrap the boot. And I was like, sure, I like booting Bootstrap. So we have been working on this app for a bit, and I do a lot of what I like to call the front end of the front end. I love Angular to pieces, but sometimes when people start talking about the back end of the front end, I start to glaze over. So I really was excited about doing this talk because I believe that I can sell it to even those of you out there who are like, I just do CSS all day. I'm like, I got you. I got you. So we're working on ng-doc, and all of the screenshots will be in that. And I'm going to walk us through the steps of breaking down service workers. And hopefully, they won't be intimidating anymore. And maybe some of you out there are like, I already got this. Right on, man. Maybe help the guy next to you. So the first step is going to be install the service worker, which it said yarn. And up until this point, I'd been using npm. And so I was like, maybe I could just swap out the word yarn for npm. Totally worked. My husband was like, so, hon, yarn is built on npm, and he started like going into this whole thing. He's like, you can't use yarn without using npm, and I was like, please, the world is breaking. Okay, so npm install, yarn install, whatever you've got to do, but get that Angular/service worker going. So this is in my terminal, and it was actually a GIF of me recording the first time I installed it, and I was excited because I'm like, oh yeah, npm install, I got this, right? And it should be super easy. Step number 1, nothing could go. What could possibly go wrong, right? So yeah, let's just zoom in on that. The moral of this story, I'm not going to take you through the rabbit hole, is make sure your dependencies are up to date. I don't know. My name's Alyssa. Hi. I have out-of-date dependencies. Yeah, I know. So I know it's a pain, but I have some good news for you in this dark time of our lives. Right now, we have to go through and update those dependency numbers one by one. But I know a guy. His name's Mike. And I don't know if you were here for the keynote, but he created a little thing he likes to call ng-update. And it's literally going to revolutionize our update lives. So can we all just be like, woo for Mike, woo! Seriously, me and Mike do a podcast, and so I'll reach out to him in the middle of the day for random whatevers. And I was at the grocery store, I had my earbuds in, and I was like checking out, and I was like, Mike, do I really have to go through and update these one by one? And he was like, actually, I'm working on this thing right now, and like went into it. And so I was like, so I can use that? And he's like, well, not yet. We're actually adding all these features. And I was like, why do you always gotta overkill it, Mike? So long story short, we're going to have an incredible update. But for now, we have to suck it up and update our dependencies like women. So what I can only describe as an eternity later, we're still on step number 1. Because apparently I have dyslexia and I can't actually read in the terminal like what packages it's telling me to update. I don't know why, but eventually I did get to go to step number 2. I got all the dependencies up to date, and now it's time to enable my service worker. So there's these 2 little lines that we run, and because the CLI is so amazing, it enables our service worker. And so that one was easy. It was a breeze. Oof. I got to go on to number 3. And number 3 is import our service worker in the root app module. So that's in our app module.ts file. We do these 2 import lines, import service worker, import environment. And then in the imports array, we get to do step number 4, which is to register our service worker. This should all pretty much be sounding familiar. For me, though, I kind of got a little bit angry because up until now, everything in our imports array, which was quite lengthy, was like one word. And I was like, I'm calling a register helper inside my imports array. It took me off on a rabbit hole. I was like, really? What you need to know, though, is that you add this to your imports array to register your service worker and enable it only during production mode. Now, if you're anything like me, you're going, but why? I was like, why production mode? Why don't we just do it for everything? And so I contacted my friend Steven. I was like, hey, Steven, why can't we run it in anything but production mode? And as the Steven do, he said, it'd break developer expectations. And after working with a service worker for like this many minutes, once I got into it, I was completely on his side. I was like, yeah, I don't really want those around during development mode. But, so let's enable them, but let's enable them for production mode. This is the key thing to remember. Number 5, create the config file. Oh, the config file. So this is the beating heart of our service worker, right? The ngsw-config.json, that sexy file. Everybody wants one. Everybody wants one. And there's no reason to be afraid. It's just JSON. I shortened it up there for you. But essentially, the CLI has a boilerplate one. The Angular docs have one. I think my next door neighbor's mom has a config file that they swear by. And if you've ever Googled a service worker bug, you're going to find some guy on Stack Overflow who's like, just use my config file. Don't worry about it. Just swap out mine for yours for mine, and then you'll be good. So really, at the end of the day, like, everybody's got one, and just pick one and slap it in there, and like, let's move on to number 6. All right? So that's what I did. So number 6, we get to build the project. ng-build --prod. At this point, I want you to be very sure before you run this, because I've heard rumors that they can be very hard to remove. It's a bit of cow humor for you people. It's time to wake up. So, you have been warned. Build the project. So I actually want to ask, how many people out there have actually ever ran ng-build in an Angular project? Ooh! I'm going to say that was like between 33 and 50% of the audience. It was around there. So I had never done it before. Again, front end to the front end. I would be like, hey, Joe, that feature you asked me to do, it's pushed up to GitHub. And he'd be like, great, I'll make sure it goes live, right? So like, I'd never needed this. And so as I was going through, I was like, okay, I can do this, right? I run build, cd into the dist file, or the folder, and try to run ng-serve, right? And I literally thought of this GIF whenever it broke, because I was like, it broke. Like, I love that Aladdin GIF. And so I went back to the docs, and immediately, I hit the next line, because ng-serve does not work with service workers. And I'm like, oh, of course. Just read, Alyssa, just read. So, that's actually from the ranch in Oklahoma. They don't like when you take pictures of them. It's weird. We can't use ng-serve. We're left out in the cold like animals. Maybe some of you are okay with that, but for me personally, it was a freak out moment. So we need to run the project in production mode. Docs tell us we need to cd into dist and use the HTTP server. I'm like, okay, docs, you're telling me to use the server? I'll use the server. So I go ahead and I run HTTP server, and then like, ZSH is all like, nah, brah, nah. And I'm like, okay, shout out to ZSH, because that thing's killer. But command not found. I'm like, what the dickens? So again, I'm not going to take you through that rabbit hole. But really, it's like the simplest answer that you would have never guessed, npm install it, right? Like, if you've never used HTTP server, because you're a front end of the front end girl like me, just install it, and then you'll be good. The route I went, which you will see in some screenshots, back in the day, I used to work at Code School, and they were a Ruby shop, and so all my Ruby backend buds, I remember they told me that by default, we come with this Python simple server. So in my screenshots, you'll see an alias to that. Really, you can choose either one. But I went into the dist folder, I ran that, and it was working. I was like, yes, it's working. So I went over to my browser, pulled up localhost, and I mean, this was a huge moment for me, because at this point, I'd literally just been following along. I didn't write anything custom. And this is what our app, like, you can see it's in offline mode. By default, it was caching all this stuff. And I was just like, magic. It was so cool. I was literally ecstatic. At this point, I was like, okay, no matter what bugs come my way, I can conquer them because it's working, right? My next thought immediately, though, was how do I update my code? Because I'm assuming like Command-Shift-R, like if I go and change something, won't work. And so for a real quick test, we recently transitioned from red to green, like the whole theme changed. and I had yet to update the logo. So what I did was I grabbed the new logo I made, I swapped the red one for the green one, and then I went into incognito and was like, let's see the change, right? I go to my local host, I pull it up, and no matter how many times I refreshed, there was still a red logo there. Of course there was. So no panicking, it's okay. It's actually the service worker doing its job. It's looking at the cache version before downloading the new stuff. So really, it hit me. I was like, maybe we should rebuild and restart. So as soon as I did that, rebuild, restart, and then I went over and I pulled it up again. Refresh, boop, green. I was like, yes, okay. So at this point, I was like, I can still do things. The service worker's not going to break everything, Alyssa. Calm down. But I don't know if you see the red. That was my next step. I basically jumped from shiny thing to shiny thing. The logo had been bothering me, and now I'm like, okay, now this red is bothering me. And we have our loader here because everything, like these default assets are being cached, but we're not getting our articles or our tags or anything really from our backend. We have errors galore. So this whole time in my terminal, when Alyssa wants to go and work on ng-doc, she starts her npm server, the backend, and then I go and I start the front end, and then I work. So this whole time I had the backend running. I think I was assuming somehow the service worker would just know about my backend, and connect it. I expect way too much magic out of life, I think. So I researched into it a bit. And proxies, hey, oh, this was so fun. Has anybody ever used a proxy like this before? Anybody? A couple? Okay, cool. Some of you are gonna learn something new. So when you run HTTP server, you can use a flag called --proxy or -p. And this proxies all requests which cannot be resolved. So if it fails, then it's gonna go look at the proxy. I was like, cool, that sounds like exactly what I need in my life. So I gave it the localhost 8801 because that's where my npm server was like serving up the stuff. And I went and I refreshed and I got all the assets and the tags and I was like, I did it, a service workered. And so I went and clicked a little offline mode and of course, right? No, it failed miserably. I look over at my dog at this point. He's a wiener dog, and he's giving me this give up on life, right? I'm like, no, we're gonna do this, all right? We have one final step to caching victory. Hang in there, guys. So this one is kind of the fun one, I think. It's caching the custom bits. So we go back into our sexy ngsw-config.json file, and we're gonna create a data group. Do not be intimidated. We're gonna give that data group a name. I named it API-performance. We will go into that in a moment. And then I added the URLs. Alyssa, how'd you know what URLs to add? Well, the front end, Alyssa, just looked at what errors she had. It was like, can't find /API/tags. Let's put that there. Can't find /API/art. Let's put that one in there. So yeah, it's super complicated yeah. I put all of the routes that I was like, not getting these. Let's put those suckers in there. And then I added a cache config. And this is where a bit of strategy comes in. So as before, I said we named it API-performance. We can do performance or we can do freshness. And so performance is essentially saying, look at the cached goodness first and then refer to the newness later. Whereas freshness is like, no, I want the freshest stuff first, fall back on the cache stuff. So at this point, I'm like, I don't care what strategy we use. I just want to see something in offline mode. So I put performance on there. I do a max size of 100, max age of 3 days. And now you can see the offline glory. Oh, I was so excited, you guys. It works. Look, everyone get a hand. Come on. Service workers rule. Yes. So we're in offline mode. We have all of the cool assets by default. We've got our articles. We've got our tags. We're in the happiest place ever, and I don't think it was too painful. I hope that's what you get. I really, really do. I hope that you take away that it can make a difference to people who are just everyday devs like you and me, or users like you and me. Some people would even say that if not for cows, service workers would have never been invented. Some people say that. I don't know who, but somebody does. I've really been enjoying this time being close to family and working on the ranch, hanging out with the amazing cow critters. But without service workers, it literally would have been crippling. And it was just so painfully obvious. So I want you, when you're thinking, should I service worker? Is it worth the 30 minutes to set up? Just remember, it's for the cow puppies. That was the first cow that was born on the ranch, and it literally feels like a puppy. Thank you all so much for your time today. Have an amazing travel back. Thank you.